Hello, this is The Gaze, and you are welcome to the News Digest. Today in the episode, everyone will serve in Russia. Putin approves call-up mobilization for reservists. A new ground-based launcher for Tomahawk missiles revealed. Is that preparation for Ukraine? The EU is preparing its 19th package of sanctions against Russia. Banking and oil will suffer. Oshkosh Defense has unveiled a new ground-based launcher called the X-MAV, a multi-purpose vehicle that could be adapted to fire long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles, a weapon system Ukraine has expressed interest in acquiring from the United States. Photos and demonstrations of potential Tomahawk launch platforms were shown at the AUSA 2025 exhibition in Washington, D.C. Naval News reported on the 13th of October. At the show, the vehicle was displayed fitted with 4 Tomahawk missiles, a loadout ready to destroy military objects. The demonstrations come amid political statements on arms transfers. On 13th October, U.S. President Donald Trump said he would send Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine if the conflict is not resolved. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, in an interview published on 12th October, discussed potential targets Ukraine would strike if it receives Tomahawks. The meeting of the presidents is scheduled for October 17th.
I hope that I will have possibility to come to Washington and have a meeting on Friday with President. And of course, I have some more meetings which are also important for me. Some military companies which are important. I want to not to share details about it, and also maybe also some meetings with senators, congressmen.
What are Tomahawk missiles known for, and why are they such a painful point for the Kremlin? The Tomahawk is a long-range, precision-guided cruise missile designed for deep strike missions against high-value targets. Launched primarily from U.S. Navy ships and submarines, it can travel up to 2,500 kilometers, about 1,550 miles, and deliver conventional warheads with pinpoint accuracy. Each missile, costing around $1.3 million, weighs roughly 1,500 kilograms and spans over 6 meters in length. They can be launched vertically from ships or horizontally from submarines via torpedo tubes. The initial launch is powered by a solid-fueled booster before switching to a jet engine for sustained flight. If supplied to Ukraine, Tomahawks would significantly extend Kyiv's strike range, allowing it to hit military bases, airfields, logistics hubs, and command centers deep inside Russian territory, targets currently beyond reach. And what about Trump's opinion on providing this kind of missiles to Ukraine? He was pretty straightforward about that.
And we talked about the weapons they need, what kind of weapons. They need Patriots very badly. They'd like to have Tomahawks. That's a step up. They'd like to have Tomahawks. We talked about that. And so we'll see. Well, I don't know. I might have to speak to Russia, to be honest with you, about Tomahawks.
The main term for Ukraine getting Tomahawk missiles, as announced by Trump, is the lack of willingness to end the war or even engage in a ceasefire with Ukraine from the Russian side. And there's obviously no such intention in the Kremlin when we look at the continued missile and drone strikes against Ukraine. Massive assault attempts by the Russian army along the front line, etc., etc. And what about diplomacy? Steve Witkoff had to negotiate something in the Kremlin, but apparently ended up listening to history lectures for 5 hours, Trump mockingly said while staying in the Middle East.
I set up the meeting with Putin and I called. I said, is Steve finished yet? That was about a half an hour into the meeting. No, sir, he's not. He's still inside. This is in Moscow. I said, well, how's he doing? I don't know, sir. He's still inside. I called up an hour later. Let me speak to Steve. Sir, he's still with Putin. He's with President Putin. I said, wow, that's a long meeting, 1 hour. I called up an hour later, he was still with Putin. 3 hours later, he was still with Putin. 4 hours later, he started to get the word that he was going to be coming out soon. And in 5 hours, he came out. I said, what the hell were you talking about for 5 hours? And he says, just a lot of interesting things.
So what will happen, and what should we expect? Well, as Winston Churchill has, allegedly, said it, Americans can always be trusted to do the right thing once all other possibilities have been exhausted. Maybe now, when obviously finally all other possibilities are exhausted, and international diplomacy in general, and America's in particular, will finally take a new turn with Russia. Peace through strength, and not the other way around. The Russian government has approved a draft law giving Russian dictator Putin the authority to call up mobilization reservists, not only during war or formal mobilization, but also in peacetime, as the Moscow Times reported, citing Russian state media on October 13th. It's important to note that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has proceeded without a formal declaration of war, with Moscow describing it as a special military operation under Russian law. Under the proposed rules, citizens enrolled in the mobilization reserve could be tasked with defense-related duties during armed conflicts, counter-terror operations, or when Russian forces are deployed abroad. These call-ups, termed special military assemblies, would be authorized directly by Putin. The law would only apply to those who have signed a contract with the Ministry of Defense to serve in the reserve. Currently, legislation allows reservists to be used only during wartime or mobilization, with no provisions for peacetime deployment, according to the Moscow Times.
According to the draft, citizens in the mobilization human reserve will be able to be directed to perform certain tasks in the field of defense in the event of armed conflicts, counter-terrorist operations, as well as the involvement of the Russian armed forces abroad. They will be called to special military meetings, the decisions on which will be made by the head of state, from the publication of the Kommersant UA magazine on their website.
Worth noting one thing. It was not a law that allowed Russian reservists not to be sent to any active hotspot hostility zone. It was a so-called social contract, an agreement between the Russian government and the Russian people that was not signed nor stamped in any official way. Nevertheless, it was the epitome of the collective national vision, maybe the last one left in Russia. The mutual understanding of things that said, we the people send our sons to Russian army, but actual warfare is for contractees. Now this mutual understanding is waived one-sidedly by the Russian self-anointed Tsar, and new agreement is forced upon Russian nation by Putin. I am the people, and you are a cannon fodder. Talking to many experts these days, as it is my direct professional duty, I find a few amongst them who can clearly say things that are in accord with their own experience. General Ben Hodges is most certainly amongst these few.
If Russia had attacked Poland in 2025 the same way it attacked Ukraine, it would have been destroyed by NATO air forces and ground forces. Kaliningrad would have been destroyed within hours. One can be certain. In the first hours, Kaliningrad is gone. All Russian facilities have been destroyed. Any Russian military facilities in Sevastopol have been destroyed too. So direct comparisons are inappropriate here.
Kaliningrad is the only Russian Baltic seaport that is ice-free all year, and hence plays an important role in the maintenance of the country's Baltic fleet. The oblast is mainly flat, as the highest point is the 230 meters, 750 feet, Gora Dozor Hill, near the tri-point of the Poland-Russia border, Lithuania-Russia border. It's estimated that approximately 25,000 Russian soldiers are stationed in the region, which is more than the entire Lithuanian armed forces, including volunteer self-defense forces, a total of approximately 20,000 people. Sevastopol is the largest city in Ukrainian peninsula of Crimea that Russia has annexed. It is a major port on the Black Sea. Due to its strategic location and the navigability of the city's harbors, Sevastopol has been an important naval base of the Russian Navy, and it is the main base of the Black Sea Fleet. Now you can see Ukrainian intelligence committing strikes on Russian military objects in the occupied peninsula. It is from Sevastopol that many attacks on Ukrainian cities are carried out. Is NATO ready for war with Russia? Why should it be ready? Well, General Hodges offers an answer to that question that is an only viable option for a country fallen into absolute totalitarianism, dictatorship, and terroristic blackmailing behavior, such as Russia, and that answer sounds like fool around and find out. The Group of Seven intends to tighten pressure on Russian oil exports as much as possible, Reuters reports. Finance ministers from the G7 countries will gather in the coming days for a meeting of the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank in Washington. They plan to discuss a plan of measures to increase pressure on the aggressor country's economy. This includes increasing oil production in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Nikita Skoblikov will continue this discussion.
The European Union intends to increase pressure on Russia in order to undermine its military-industrial potential, said the EU's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas.
Will soon adopt new measures targeting Russia's energy, finance and trade revenues. Russia's war economy is already weak. We will make it weaker. Inflation exceeds 20%, cash reserves are depleted, and growth is close to zero.
The EU is preparing its 19th package of sanctions against Russia. The new restrictions are expected to affect key sectors of the Russian economy, including the banking system, the so-called shadow fleet, and individuals who help the Kremlin circumvent existing sanctions.
Work continues on tightening sanctions pressure, and as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said, the pause in some sanction decisions has dragged on too long. We urgently need to adopt the 19th package, and it must be as strong as possible. We expect stronger sanctions against the shadow fleet, the military, industrial, and financial sectors of Russia, and personal sanctions against those involved in the abduction of Ukrainian children and the spread of Kremlin propaganda. The goal of sanctions pressure is to restore a just peace, as these restrictions systematically deprive Russia of the resources it needs for war.
On the War and Sanctions portal, Ukraine's defense intelligence has published a list of companies that are part of the Russian state corporation Rostec, but are still not subject to Western sanctions. This information is intended to help Ukraine's partners synchronize their sanctions policies and close the remaining loopholes that Moscow uses to support its military-industrial complex. According to Ukraine's military intelligence, 86 out of 145 companies under the Technodynamica holding remain outside any sanctions lists.
The Technodynamica holding plays a key role in the production of barrel and rocket artillery systems, ammunition, military-grade gunpowder, and explosives. Its enterprises also manufacture unmanned aerial vehicles, long-range cruise missile launchers, armor plates, personal protective equipment, and develop simulators for military aviation, parachute systems, and aircraft engines. Additionally, they are responsible for repairs and life extension of strategic bombers Tu-95MS and Tu-160 from the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine's publication on Facebook.
Western sanctions have already hit many sectors of the aggressor country's economy. According to the Financial Times, Russia's coal industry is experiencing its worst crisis in 3 decades. Russian state statistics report that in the first 7 months of 2025, the sector incurred losses of nearly $3 billion, and the pressure is only set to increase. The main focus is on limiting Russia's revenues from energy exports. In the coming days, finance ministers of the G7 countries plan to discuss boosting oil production in Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, Reuters reports. The agency also notes that the G7 wants to persuade India to reduce purchases of Russian oil and replace them with supplies from the Persian Gulf.
If the rich industrialized nations are serious, they could slash Moscow's income from overseas crude by up to $80 billion a year. That would deliver a big blow to the Kremlin's flagging economy and might even get President Vladimir Putin to stop his war in Ukraine. Hugo Dixon, columnist, in a commentary to Reuters.
One of the main contributors to Russia's budget, the oil refining industry, is suffering heavy losses due to strikes by Ukrainian defense forces. As of September 2025, equipment for processing about 1.5 million barrels of oil per day has been destroyed or damaged. That's nearly 20% of capacity. The result is a fuel crisis that has affected at least 57 Russian regions. Putin has ordered multi-billion-dollar subsidies for refineries under the guise of financial aid. A decree signed by the dictator on October 11th allows oil refining companies to continue receiving subsidies, even if wholesale market prices for gasoline and diesel significantly exceed the government's price cap. Reported by Nikita Skoblikov, UATV News.
Don't forget to subscribe to The Gaze to stay updated on what's happening in the world, straight from a Ukrainian perspective. Stay tuned and take care.